The waitress caught the hacker's signal on his phone and stopped the breach before he even noticed. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. In the heart of Manhattan, the bustling atmosphere of a high-end restaurant was in full swing. Guests in tuxedos and expensive dresses sipped champagne, clinked glasses, and discussed multi-million-dollar deals, while the waitstaff moved like shadows through the crowd. At one of the tables sat a man in his mid-30s, impeccably dressed, his sharp features almost hidden behind the glowing screen of his phone. His name was Jack Anderson, the CEO of a billion-dollar tech company. He was known for his ruthless business tactics and an air of arrogance that made even the most experienced waiters nervous. But today, something was different. Christina Matthews, the waitress who was serving his table, had been on her feet for 8 hours. She wasn't particularly interested in the power dynamics of her job. She had her own world to deal with. However, she had a knack for noticing small details that most people missed. She had always been observant, a skill honed over the years of working in the fast-paced, demanding environment of fine dining. As she approached Jack's table to refill his water, she noticed something odd. A faint, almost imperceptible flicker on his phone's screen, as though a signal had just been transmitted. She had no idea what it was, but she recognized it. It was something she had seen before, something she knew was dangerous. It was a signal from a hacker. At first, she hesitated. Should she say something? Could she risk her job over a strange hunch? But the thought of a cyber attack on someone so powerful was unsettling. She could almost feel the tension in the air around Jack as he continued to scroll through his phone, oblivious to the impending danger. Christina moved closer, her heart racing slightly. She had no formal training in cybersecurity, but she had a deep interest in technology and had taken a few online courses in digital security during her free time. She had seen the signs of a cyber breach before, and this was one of them. A hacker was trying to gain access to Jack's personal data, possibly even his company's network. She knew she had to act, but she had to be careful. Without a second thought, Christina casually stepped closer, using her knowledge of smartphones to check the signal herself. She didn't know if the hacker was still active or if it was a one-time blip, but either way, it wasn't something she could ignore. Her instincts told her this wasn't just a glitch. The hacker was attempting to break into Jack's account, and if she didn't do something now, it could lead to a catastrophic data breach. But how could she stop it without causing a scene? She couldn't just grab his phone, and she definitely couldn't risk making Jack feel like a target. As she moved back toward the kitchen, she felt the weight of her decision. She had no idea what Jack would do if he found out, but she knew she had to protect him, even if he didn't realize it yet. As Christina made her way back to the kitchen, her mind was racing. She had just seen a signal that could compromise not only Jack Anderson's personal data, but also his company's most confidential information. But what could she do? How could she, a waitress, possibly stop a hacker in his tracks without making a scene? She felt a knot form in her stomach as she tried to process what she had just witnessed. She had worked in restaurants for years, serving high-profile clients, but never had she encountered something like this. The world of corporate espionage was far beyond her pay grade, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that she had to do something. The hacker's signal was still fresh in her mind, and she knew the threat was real. Every second mattered. Without wasting any more time, she slipped into the back room, away from the bustling restaurant floor. Her heart was pounding, and her palms were sweating. Christina was good at reading people and situations, but this was different. She had no idea what the hacker was capable of, and if she was wrong, she could lose everything: her job, her reputation, maybe even more. She tried to calm herself and think clearly. She had seen these kinds of signals before in the online cybersecurity courses she had taken years ago. It was a small hobby of hers, a way to keep her mind sharp after long shifts. She wasn't an expert, but she understood the basics. The signal she had seen was a clear sign of a breach attempt, and if she didn't act quickly, the hacker would succeed in infiltrating Jack's phone and possibly his corporate systems. Christina took a deep breath and reached for her phone. She knew what she had to do. She quickly accessed the security app she had on her own phone, one that allowed her to track and block suspicious signals on nearby devices. It was a long shot, but she had to try. She focused on Jack's table, waiting for any new signal from his phone. It wasn't long before she saw it. The hacker's signal was back, stronger than before. Christina's heart skipped a beat as she tapped into her app, blocking the signal as quickly as possible. She had no idea if it would work, but it was the only thing she could do. The next few minutes felt like an eternity. She checked her phone repeatedly, making sure she hadn't missed anything. There was no way of knowing if she had successfully blocked the hacker, or if the attack was still ongoing. But as she saw the signal dissipate, a wave of relief washed over her. She had done something, and that was all that mattered for now. She glanced over at Jack's table. He was still engrossed in his phone, completely unaware of the digital battle that had just taken place. She couldn't help but wonder how many other people, with their million-dollar companies and high-powered positions, were unaware of the vulnerabilities lurking in their systems. As Christina stood there, watching Jack, she realized that the world she lived in was full of hidden dangers, and sometimes, the quietest people could make the biggest impact. She had just saved a billionaire's company from a digital breach, and she hadn't even been noticed. She smiled to herself, the weight of the moment sinking in. But the job wasn't done yet. She had to be sure the hacker wouldn't try again. Without giving herself time to dwell on the success, she moved back to the dining area. She kept a careful eye on Jack as she went about her duties, but the rest of the night passed without incident. As the last guests left the restaurant and the staff began to clean up, Christina felt a sense of accomplishment. She had stopped a cyber attack and protected someone who would never know what had just happened. But as she turned off the lights and locked the door behind her, Christina knew that the night's events were only the beginning. She had become a silent hero in a world where the most dangerous threats were often the ones that no one saw coming. The next few days went by in a blur for Christina. She had never expected her life to change so dramatically in such a short time. The night she had stopped the hacker's breach, she went home feeling a strange mixture of pride and unease. She had done something that mattered, something that most people would never even know about. But as the days passed, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. At work, everything seemed normal at first. She served tables, smiled at customers, and carried on with her usual routine. But a part of her felt different. A part of her kept wondering if Jack Anderson, the billionaire CEO whose data she had just protected, knew what had happened. It was almost a week later when Jack returned to the restaurant. He came in with a group of colleagues, all dressed in dark suits, talking business as usual. Christina wasn't sure whether she should expect him to recognize her, or if he even cared about what had happened that night. She felt a little nervous, but she kept her composure as she walked over to his table. This time, she didn't approach him like just another waitress. She had a quiet confidence now, knowing she had done something that most people could never have done. She greeted him politely, but he didn't acknowledge her at first. He was too busy talking to his colleagues. When he finally looked up at her, she saw something different in his eyes. It wasn't the cold, dismissive look she was used to. There was curiosity there. "You," he said, his voice steady but with a hint of surprise. Christina paused, unsure of what he meant. "You're the one." "Who?" He didn't finish his sentence, but the implication was clear. He knew. He knew she had stopped the hacker's breach, and he was acknowledging her in a way that made her feel both uncomfortable and proud at the same time. "I just did what I had to do," she replied, trying to keep things casual. "You did more than that," Jack said, his tone shifting. "You saved my company from a disaster. I don't know how to thank you for that." Christina didn't know how to respond. She had never expected any recognition for what she had done. She was just a waitress, after all, and people like Jack Anderson didn't usually notice people like her. But here he was, looking at her with respect. It was both flattering and intimidating. "I was just doing my job," she said, keeping her voice neutral. Jack smiled faintly, but there was something more in his expression. It was almost as if he was seeing her for the first time, not as a waitress, but as someone with real value. "Well, I owe you more than just thanks. I'd like to offer you a job," he said, his words catching her off guard. "A job?" Christina repeated, her heart racing. "Yes," Jack said, leaning back in his chair. "You clearly have skills that my team could use. I want you to join my company. I'll make sure you're compensated well for it, too." Christina was speechless for a moment. She had never even considered working for someone like Jack Anderson, let alone in his company. She had no experience in corporate environments. She was just a woman trying to make a living. But the offer was tempting, especially considering the financial struggles she had been facing. "I don't know what to say," she finally replied. I don't have the qualifications for a position like that." Jack's eyes softened. "You don't need qualifications. You have something more valuable, an instinct for what matters. That's something money can't buy." Christina didn't know how to respond to that. She wasn't sure if she was ready for a change that big, but the idea of a different life, one where she could use her skills and get out of the cycle of waiting tables, was alluring. She couldn't help but imagine what it would be like to leave her current life behind and step into a world of opportunity. But at the same time, she felt like a fraud. She had spent years hiding who she truly was, never letting anyone know what she was capable of. And now, here was Jack, offering her a chance to step into a new role, one that would put her in a completely different world. "I'll think about it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Take all the time you need," Jack replied, giving her a reassuring smile. "But don't wait too long. Opportunities like this don't come around every day." As Christina walked away from the table, her mind was swirling. She didn't know what to do. She had spent so long just surviving, getting by, that the thought of something bigger, something more meaningful, felt overwhelming. But for the first time in a long while, she realized she had choices. And those choices could lead her down a completely different path. A path she never thought was possible. Christina spent the next few days in a whirlwind of thoughts. Jack's offer was still fresh in her mind, but the more she thought about it, the more it seemed like a dream. The idea of leaving her life as a waitress and stepping into a corporate world was both exciting and terrifying. She had always kept a low profile, hidden behind the apron and the polite smile. She never expected someone like Jack Anderson to see her, let alone offer her a position at his company. But that offer was a lifeline. It was an opportunity she had been too afraid to hope for, let alone pursue. She had always been good with numbers, with technology, but she had never thought she could make a career out of it. And yet here she was, at a crossroads. Should she stay in her comfort zone, the life she knew, or should she take a chance and dive into something completely new? It was a decision that weighed heavily on her. Meanwhile, her job at the restaurant had taken on a strange new significance. Every time she saw Jack, it felt like a reminder of the life she could have. But it also reminded her of her own insecurities, the fact that she didn't belong in a world like his. She knew that if she accepted the offer, she would be stepping into a world where she would constantly feel out of place. That night, as she closed up the restaurant and prepared to head home, her mind was filled with questions. She had always prided herself on being independent, on making ends meet on her own terms. But now, the prospect of working with Jack Anderson felt like it might be her ticket out. She had worked long enough to know the value of hard work, but she also knew the world was filled with opportunities that she would never have access to unless she took risks. She had spent so many years playing it safe, staying in the background, but was it time to finally step forward? When she got home, she tried to put it all out of her mind. But it wasn't easy. The offer was too big to ignore, and the thought of turning it down seemed equally daunting. Christina sat in her small apartment, staring at the walls, her thoughts racing. What if she failed? What if they found out she wasn't qualified? The self-doubt crept in, but she quickly pushed it aside. She had to at least try. The next morning, as she walked into the restaurant, Christina noticed a shift in the atmosphere. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. And that feeling only grew stronger when she saw Jack sitting at a table by the window. This time, he wasn't alone. He was meeting with a group of investors, discussing some project she couldn't quite hear from where she was standing. As she approached his table, she noticed the same intensity in his eyes that had been there before. But there was something else there too, a glimmer of expectation. "Christina," he greeted her with a nod, as though he had been expecting her. "Are you ready to talk about that offer?" The question took her by surprise. She had been expecting him to give her more time, but here he was, putting her on the spot. She felt her heart race as she stood in front of him, her thoughts momentarily frozen. "Yes," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I've thought about it. I think I'm ready to take the next step." Jack smiled, his expression approving. "Good. We'll get the details sorted out soon. I've already spoken to HR, and they'll start the process." He paused for a moment, watching her closely. "I'm glad you're making this decision. I think you'll be a great asset to the team." Christina felt a rush of emotions, excitement, fear, hope, all swirling together. She had made her decision, and now there was no turning back. But at that moment, something else caught her attention. As she turned to leave the table, her eyes caught a glimpse of a familiar figure sitting at the bar. It was the man she had seen at the restaurant a few nights ago, the one who had been trying to hack into Jack's phone. She froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. Was he here to finish what he had started? Or was it just a coincidence? The man's eyes met hers, and for a brief second, their gazes locked. Christina's pulse quickened. She had to do something. But what? She didn't know if she should tell Jack about the hacker or if it was too late. As she made her way back to the kitchen, she couldn't shake the feeling that the hacker's presence wasn't a coincidence. Something wasn't right, and she needed to figure out what it was before it was too late. Christina could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. Her mind kept racing as she watched the man from the bar. His eyes had followed her, and the recognition hit her like a punch in the gut. He was the one she had seen that night, during the hacker breach. Why was he here now? She glanced over her shoulder, but by the time she turned back, he had already left. Was he still after Jack's phone? Was this a continuation of what she had stopped before? She could not let it go. Christina's thoughts were interrupted when Jack stood up from his table. His meeting had ended, and the group of investors were heading out the door. He caught her eye across the room, giving her a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was as if he expected her to come over and speak to him. She could feel the weight of the decision she had just made. She had accepted his offer to join his company. The next chapter of her life was starting, but the problem with the hacker remained unresolved. She walked over to his table, her feet moving automatically as she weighed her options. She could tell him about the hacker, but she wasn't sure if he would take her seriously. He had already seen her as just a waitress, and she had been trying to blend in, to remain unnoticed. The last thing she wanted was to complicate things. But now, the hacker's presence lingered in her mind, and she knew she could not ignore it any longer. "Jack," she said, her voice steady despite the rising tension in her chest. "There's something I need to tell you." He raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "What's going on?" he asked, his tone shifting slightly. Christina glanced around the room, ensuring no one was listening. "It's about the night I stopped the hacker from accessing your phone. I think he's still trying to get in," she said quietly, her eyes scanning the restaurant as if to make sure the man hadn't reappeared. Jack's expression changed immediately, his posture straightening. "What do you mean? Are you sure?" he asked, his voice dropping lower, a tone of concern creeping in. Christina hesitated, looking at him. She could tell that he didn't understand the gravity of the situation, but she couldn't explain everything right then. "I saw him again," she said. "The man from the bar. He was here today, watching me. I think he might be involved with the hacker's attack. I don't know how, but I don't think it's over." Jack was silent for a moment, processing what she had said. The tension in the air seemed to thicken. Then, without warning, he stood up. "Show me where he was sitting," he said, his voice firm. "We need to take care of this now." Christina didn't know what to do. Jack was taking her seriously, but she hadn't expected him to act so quickly. She led him to the spot where she had seen the man, but by the time they got there, he was gone. The restaurant was almost empty now, the evening rush over. She felt a sinking feeling in her stomach as she glanced around, but there was no sign of the hacker. "He's gone," she said, a touch of frustration in her voice. "But I'm telling you, he was here." Jack didn't seem surprised, just more focused than ever. "If he's involved in something, we need to find him. I'll have my security team track him down. In the meantime, stay alert. I'll make sure you're not alone when you're here." Christina nodded, a feeling of unease still lingering. "What about the breach? The hacker has access to your company's systems. If we don't stop him," Jack cut her off. "Don't worry about that. We'll handle it. My team will take care of it from here." Christina wasn't so sure, but she nodded. Jack seemed confident, but her instincts told her this wasn't over. The hacker was still out there, and until he was caught, there would always be the possibility that he would strike again. She left the restaurant that night feeling more uncertain than ever. Her life had just changed with the job offer, but the threat of the hacker cast a long shadow over everything. Could she really walk away from the world of threats and secrecy that she had just entered? Or would this hacker be the one to pull her back into a world she didn't want to be a part of? The next morning, she received a call from Jack. He wanted to meet her at his office to discuss the next steps, to formalize her position. As she walked into the building, She couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. Would she really take this job, knowing that she had just uncovered a cyber threat that could bring down Jack's company? The thought of continuing her life as a waitress seemed like a distant memory, but the hacker, the man who had been watching her, was still lurking in the background. She had no choice but to move forward, but she knew this journey would not be as simple as it seemed. The shadows of the past were closing in, and they were ready to follow her into whatever came next. Christina walked into Jack's office the next morning, her mind swirling with doubt and anticipation. She had made the decision to take the job, but now that it was becoming real, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The events of the past few days, the hacker, the unexpected offer, and Jack's calm assurances had all been too much for her to process in such a short time. But she had made the choice, and there was no turning back. As she stepped into the sleek, glass-walled office, the view of the city was breathtaking. From the 87th floor, Manhattan spread out before her like an endless sea of possibility. Jack was sitting behind a massive desk, his phone in one hand, a laptop open in front of him. He looked up as she entered, giving her a small smile. "Christina," he said, his tone more relaxed than it had been at the restaurant. "Glad you could make it." "Of course," she replied, her voice steady despite the nerves churning inside her. She had agreed to this, but now, standing in his office, the magnitude of the decision hit her all over again. "I'm excited to get started," she added, trying to sound confident. Jack motioned for her to take a seat. "I've got a few things I want to go over with you, but first, I want to talk about what happened with the hacker." Christina's heart skipped a beat. She had been hoping this wouldn't come up right away, but she knew it was inevitable. She sat down across from him, trying to keep her cool. "What exactly do you know about the situation?" Jack asked, his voice serious. "I know he tried to breach your phone's security, and I stopped it," Christina said. "But it doesn't feel over. I saw him again yesterday. The man from the bar. He was watching me. I think he's still after your data." Jack's eyes narrowed. "I had my team investigate the situation. They couldn't find anything that would explain his presence or why he was targeting me. But we're taking it seriously. I want to make sure that nothing like this happens again." Christina couldn't help but wonder if Jack really understood the gravity of the situation. She had seen the signals, felt the danger, and yet his team's investigation hadn't turned up anything. She wasn't sure if they were missing something or if Jack's company was truly as secure as he thought. "I'll be keeping an eye on things," Christina said, trying to reassure him, even though her own doubts lingered. "We've got to stay vigilant." Jack leaned back in his chair, studying her for a moment. "You're sharp, Christina. I'm glad I offered you the position." She nodded, though she wasn't sure if she deserved the praise. Yes, she had stopped the hacker from causing damage, but she didn't feel like a hero. She was just a waitress who happened to notice something most people wouldn't. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft. "I'll do my best." Jack stood up, walking over to a small side table where a bottle of water and 2 glasses were set up. He poured them both a drink before returning to the desk. "Now, let's talk about your role here," he said, his tone shifting back to business. Christina sat up straighter. This was it. The moment she had been both excited and terrified of. Jack had made it clear that she had a job offer, but now it was time to talk specifics. "I want you to join my security team," he continued, "but not just as another analyst. You've got instincts. I've seen it in the way you reacted that night, and I've seen it in the way you handled that situation yesterday. I think you could make a real impact here." Christina's heart raced. This wasn't what she had expected. She had imagined starting off as some kind of assistant or entry-level position, but Jack was offering her something much more significant. A role in a high-stakes environment, where every decision could affect millions of dollars. I'm not sure I'm qualified for a position like that," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "I haven't worked in cybersecurity before, and Jack raised his hand, cutting her off. "I don't need you to be qualified in the traditional sense. You've got the skills I'm looking for. The rest can be learned." He smiled slightly. "Besides, I think you're more than qualified already. You've proven that with your actions." Christina was silent for a moment, letting his words sink in. She had spent so many years doubting herself, trying to prove to others, and to herself, that she was capable. Now here was Jack, a man with billions of dollars on the line, telling her that she had what it took. The weight of his confidence in her was both humbling and overwhelming. She took a deep breath. "All right," she said, her voice steady now. "I'll do it." Jack's smile widened. I knew you would. We'll have you start next week. In the meantime, I want you to spend some time getting familiar with the systems here. I'll have my team set you up with access. Christina nodded, a sense of determination settling in her chest. She had just agreed to take a leap into the unknown, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready. Thank you, she said again, this time with a little more conviction. Jack extended his hand across the desk. Welcome aboard. Christina shook it, her mind already racing with the possibilities of what her future could hold. But even as she took that first step into a new world, the hacker remained at the back of her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much bigger, something she wasn't fully prepared for. But she would face it head on. She had to. This was her chance. And she wasn't going to let anything stop her now. Christina spent the next few days adjusting to her new role in Jack's company. Her mind was still reeling from the decision she had made. But as she sat at her new desk on the high floor of the Anderson Capitol building, she couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. The office was sleek and modern, with large windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city. But it wasn't the view that caught her attention. It was the work in front of her. As part of Jack's security team, Christina had access to the company's internal systems, something she hadn't imagined just a few weeks ago. The walls of the office were filled with monitors displaying real-time data, security alerts, and system updates. It was a world she was only beginning to understand, but she was determined to catch up. Jack had introduced her to the team, a group of highly trained professionals who specialized in cybersecurity. They were impressive, but also intimidating. Despite their expertise, none of them had noticed the breach that had almost happened. That was what Jack had seen in Christina, the ability to notice things others overlooked. Her attention to detail had saved the company once, and now, it was time to do it again. She was determined to prove herself, not just as a waitress turned consultant, but as someone who truly belonged in this world. The team had already assigned her to a few small tasks, mostly monitoring alerts and helping to analyze security logs. But as the days went by, Christina began to notice something. There was a pattern in the system, something that didn't sit right with her. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, but she was sure it was a sign of something bigger, a security vulnerability that could be exploited. She spent hours diving into the system's backend, following the data trail. Her eyes scanned the logs, her mind working overtime to connect the dots. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but she knew that if there was a weakness, she would find it. Then, late one evening, after everyone else had gone home, she saw it. A small, inconspicuous entry in the system logs. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Someone, or something, had been accessing the company's servers remotely, bypassing their top-tier firewalls. Christina's pulse quickened as she traced the activity. The hacker had been back, but this time, they had been more careful. They had learned from their previous attempt. Her fingers flew over the keyboard as she dug deeper into the data. The remote access was sophisticated, far beyond what she had encountered before. But she wasn't going to back down. She had seen the potential for a massive breach, and she wasn't going to let it happen again. After hours of work, she managed to locate the source of the breach, an external server that had been feeding false signals into the company's network. The hacker had planted a backdoor in the system, waiting for the right moment to strike. Christina knew this was bigger than she had thought. The hacker wasn't just targeting Jack's personal data anymore. This was an attack on the entire company. She felt a surge of urgency. If she didn't act fast, the hacker could gain full access to the company's most sensitive information. Christina knew that she had to alert Jack, but she didn't want to risk raising alarms too soon. She needed to be sure, to gather as much evidence as possible before going to him. She spent the next few hours gathering the data, documenting every step of the hacker's movements through the system. When she finally had everything she needed, she left the office, her mind racing. She couldn't do this alone. As she walked to her apartment that night, she realized how much had changed. She had stepped into a world of high-stakes security, a world where every decision could have massive consequences. But with each new discovery, she felt more alive, more capable. She had a chance to make a real difference, to protect something important. The next morning, she met with Jack in his office. She had already sent him a detailed report, and he was waiting for her when she arrived. He looked up from the screen as she entered. "Christina," he said, his voice calm but serious. You found something. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. I did, she replied, holding out the report. There's a backdoor in the system. Someone has been accessing our servers remotely, and if we don't act now, it could be catastrophic. Jack's eyes hardened as he scanned the report. How bad is it? He asked, his voice steely. It's bad, Christina said, her voice steady despite the weight of the situation. They've been feeding false signals into the network. If they get full access, they could steal everything. Financial data, client information, everything. Jack stood up, walking over to the window. He stared out at the city for a long moment, his mind clearly racing. Christina watched him, waiting for him to respond. Finally, he turned to face her. You've done good work, Christina, he said, his voice low but full of gratitude. We need to move quickly. I'll have the team prepare for a full security lockdown. We're going to stop this before it's too late. Christina nodded, her heart racing. She had just uncovered the threat, and now, it was time to fight back. The hacker had underestimated her once, but they wouldn't get a second chance. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Christina had never seen Jack move so quickly or so decisively. The moment she shared her findings, Jack had mobilized his entire team. Security experts flooded the office, their faces focused and serious. Christina had never worked in such an environment before. Everything moved at a fast pace, and there was no room for mistakes. Jack's company, Anderson Capital, was one of the largest investment firms on Wall Street, and now, the entire organization was at risk. She could feel the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders as she watched the team begin their work. They were all aware that this wasn't just about stopping a hacker. It was about protecting the company's future, its reputation, and the livelihoods of everyone who depended on it. Jack was calm, but Christina could see the tension in his eyes. This was personal for him. They worked through the night, analyzing every inch of the network for any sign of further compromise. Christina had been assigned to the team working to track down the hacker's remote access point. Her instincts had been right. There were multiple layers of security breaches, each one more subtle than the last. This wasn't just a simple case of a hacker trying to steal data. This was an orchestrated attack, with the hacker trying to cover their tracks at every turn. Christina stayed focused, not allowing herself to be distracted by the gravity of the situation. They had to find the hacker before they could strike again. As the hours passed, she could see the team making progress. The breaches were slowly being contained, but it was clear that the hacker was still trying to access sensitive information. Jack's calm demeanor never wavered as he worked alongside the team. It was clear to Christina that Jack wasn't just a CEO, he was a leader. He didn't hide behind his title or delegate everything to others. He was in the trenches, working as hard as anyone else to protect his company. She respected him for that, even if she still wasn't entirely comfortable in her new role. By the early morning hours, they had located the hacker's main point of access. It was a remote server located overseas, but the signals had been masked well enough that it had taken them hours to trace the source. Jack, standing behind Christina, watched as she pulled up the data on the screen. We've got him, she said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion settling in. This server has been funneling information from our system. The hacker's been using it as a relay to cover his tracks. Jack nodded, his eyes narrowing as he processed the information. I want a team on this right now. We're going to shut this down and make sure they don't get away with it. Christina's heart raced as she worked with the team to disable the hacker's access. The breach had been stopped, but the damage was already done. They would need to rebuild their security from the ground up. It wasn't over, but they had managed to prevent the worst from happening. By the time the sun began to rise over the city, Jack stood up, his face tired but determined. We've done it, he said, looking at Christina with a sense of pride. But this is just the beginning. We need to strengthen everything. Our systems, our people, our protocols. We can't let this happen again. Christina nodded, feeling a sense of accomplishment that she hadn't felt in a long time. She had played a crucial role in stopping the breach, but more than that, she had proven her worth. Jack turned to the rest of the team, giving them a nod of approval. Great work, everyone. We're not out of the woods yet, but we've taken the first step. As the team began to pack up and head out, Jack turned to Christina. I'm glad you were here. You've shown me what you're capable of. I think we're going to do great things together. Christina felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She had made the right decision. The offer Jack had extended to her had been more than just a job. It had been a chance to step into a world she never thought she could belong to. She had proven herself, and now, she was a part of something bigger. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet but sincere. "I'm just getting started." Jack smiled, a knowing look in his eyes. "I can tell. You've got a future here, Christina, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you do with it." As she left the office, Christina felt a sense of calm settle over her. She had faced a challenge she never expected, and she had come out on top. But this was only the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, more obstacles to overcome. But for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to face whatever came next. She was no longer just a waitress in a restaurant. She was a part of something that mattered, something that would shape the future. And she wasn't going to let anything stop her now. Christina's life at Anderson Capital had shifted into a new rhythm. It was no longer just about surviving from one shift to the next or blending into the background. She was now part of a team, and with that came a weight of responsibility that she was learning to carry. The days were long, and the work was challenging, but there was something different in the air. She was making a difference. The security team had been working overtime since the breach was contained, making sure that the systems were fully secured and fortified against future attacks. Christina had proven herself in those first few days by finding the hacker's entry point, and now, she was digging deeper into the company's security infrastructure, uncovering small vulnerabilities that had been overlooked before. Every time she found something new, Jack would call her into his office and thank her, but there was a growing sense of tension in the air. They knew the hacker wouldn't give up so easily. One afternoon, after a particularly long meeting with the team, Jack called Christina into his office again. The stress lines were visible on his face, and his usually calm demeanor seemed strained. "Christina," he said, standing by the window, looking out over the city. "I've been thinking a lot about what you did, about how you found the breach, and how you've handled things since then. You've got a talent for this. I think you know that already." Christina felt her heart rate pick up. This was the moment. She had been waiting for this recognition, and now, it was finally here. But the unease in Jack's voice made her cautious. "Thanks, Jack," she replied, her voice steady. "I'm just doing my job." Jack turned to face her, his eyes intense. "Your job's been much more than anyone could have expected. I think it's time we start thinking about your future here. I've been talking to the board, and I think you're ready for more responsibility." Christina blinked, caught off guard. More responsibility? She had only been with the company for a few weeks, and already, Jack was talking about moving her up? "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice a little uncertain. Jack smiled, though there was a glint of seriousness in his eyes. "I want you to take charge of the new security division we're building. We've got some big plans for the future, and I need someone I can trust to lead the team. Someone who thinks outside the box, someone who's not afraid to challenge the status quo." Christina's mind was spinning. This was everything she had ever wanted, a chance to build something, to prove her worth in a way that went beyond the restaurant world. But there was still that nagging feeling in the back of her mind. What if she wasn't ready? What if she couldn't live up to the expectations Jack had for her? "Jack," she said, trying to find her voice, "this is a huge step. I've never managed a team before. What if I make a mistake? What if I don't have what it takes?" Jack walked over to her, his expression softening. "I know you, Christina. I've seen what you can do. You're not just a waitress anymore. You've got instincts, and you've got the drive to succeed. I wouldn't be offering you this if I didn't believe in you." Christina took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. She wasn't just working at Anderson Capital anymore. She was shaping its future. The idea of leading a team was intimidating, but the more she thought about it, the more it felt like the right path. She had always been someone who fought to be seen, to prove that she was capable of more than others assumed. Now, she had the chance to prove it on her own terms. "Okay," she said, her voice firm with resolve. "I'll do it. I'll lead the team." Jack's face lit up with a smile. "I knew you would. Let's get started." The next few weeks were a blur of activity as Christina settled into her new role. She worked closely with the existing security team to set up new protocols, update the systems, and make sure the company's data was locked down tight. She was learning at a rapid pace, her confidence growing with each successful update. Jack had been right. She was good at this. She was making a real difference. But even as she focused on securing the company's future, the hacker threat never seemed far away. Every time Christina would think the coast was clear, she would catch a glimpse of something new, an anomaly in the system or a strange email that didn't seem to fit. The hacker was still out there, watching, waiting. It wasn't over. One evening, as Christina sat in the office, reviewing logs and reports, her phone buzzed. It was an anonymous message, with a single line of text, "You can't stop me." Her blood ran cold. This wasn't just a warning. It was a challenge. The hacker knew she was onto him, and now, he was taunting her. Her pulse quickened, but she refused to let the fear take hold. This was what she had been training for, what she had prepared for. She wasn't going to let him win. As she stared at the message, she realized that the game had changed. The hacker was no longer just a threat to the company. He was a personal enemy. And Christina wasn't going to back down. The hunt was on. Christina sat back in her chair, staring at the cryptic message on her phone. "You can't stop me." The words sent a chill down her spine. It was a taunt, a declaration that the hacker knew exactly who she was and what she was doing. She had expected something like this to happen eventually, but the reality of it hit harder than she imagined. The hacker wasn't just hiding in the shadows anymore. He was challenging her directly. Her fingers hovered over her phone's screen as she fought the rising panic. She had already proven herself by stopping the breach, but this was personal. She wasn't just protecting Jack's company anymore. She was protecting everything she had worked for, everything she had built in her new life. She couldn't let this hacker win. Taking a deep breath, she started to work, knowing she had no choice but to face this head-on. She immediately checked the security logs, scanning for anything unusual. The hacker had gone silent for the moment, but she knew better than to think he was done. Every minute she wasted could be one more step he took towards accessing something even more dangerous. As she combed through the data, she noticed something unsettling. The hacker wasn't just probing for weaknesses. He was gathering information, watching, waiting. It was like he was learning the system, understanding it piece by piece. That realization hit her hard. This was more than just a random attack. The hacker was methodical, calculated. He was planning something. Christina's heart raced, but she kept her focus. If he was trying to learn the system, she would turn the tables on him. She began setting up decoy systems, creating fake data points that would send him on a wild goose chase. It wasn't foolproof, but it would buy her time. Jack had always told her to think outside the box, and now, more than ever, she needed to. For the next few hours, she worked nonstop, setting traps and reinforcing the company's security measures. Her fingers flew over the keyboard as she tried to outsmart a hacker who seemed to be just one step ahead at every turn. The intensity of the situation wasn't lost on her. This wasn't just about security anymore. This was a battle of wills. She was fighting for her future, for everything she had sacrificed to get here. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a breakthrough came. One of the decoy systems she had set up caught a signal, a subtle, hidden attempt to access the server from a different location. She traced the signal back, quickly mapping out the hacker's path. The trail was fresh, and this time, she was ready. She couldn't waste any more time. With precision and speed, Christina initiated a lockdown, locking down the most sensitive parts of the system, including financial records and client data. She had to stop the hacker before he could do any real damage. As the lockdown engaged, Christina felt a brief moment of relief. She had done it. But the hacker wouldn't give up that easily. The message still burned in her mind. "You can't stop me." It was clear now. This wasn't over. The hacker would be back. And when he returned, he would come at her with everything he had. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message. It was an incoming call. Christina's heart skipped a beat when she saw the caller ID. It was Jack. "Christina, I just got word from my team. They're reporting a strange breach in the firewall." "What's going on?" His voice was calm, but she could hear the underlying concern. "It's him," she said quickly. "The hacker. He's been back in the system, but I managed to lock him out for now. I've set up some decoys, but we need to act fast before he tries again." Jack didn't hesitate. "Good work. You've bought us some time. I want you to keep monitoring the system, and I'll have my team back you up." Christina nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "Understood. I'll stay on top of it." As she hung up, she felt a sense of resolve settle over her. This wasn't just about protecting Jack's company anymore. It was about protecting the work she had put into this new life, the life she had fought so hard to build. She wasn't going to let a hacker tear it all down. Hours passed as Christina worked tirelessly to keep The system secure. She set up additional layers of defense, watched for any suspicious activity, and coordinated with Jack's team to ensure the breach was completely closed. But despite all her efforts, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out of place. There was a nagging sense of urgency, a feeling that the hacker was out there, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As the day wore on, the exhaustion began to creep in. Christina had been at her desk for over 16 hours, with little more than coffee to keep her going. Her mind was sharp, but her body was beginning to wear down. She glanced at the clock, knowing that it was time to take a break. But before she could get up, her screen flashed. A new message appeared. It was short, but it made her blood run cold. "I'm coming for you." The hacker had made his move, and this time, it felt personal. Christina's heart skipped a beat when the message appeared on her screen. "I'm coming for you." The words felt like a direct threat, and for the first time since this whole ordeal began, Christina felt the weight of what she was dealing with. This wasn't just a hacker trying to access some corporate files anymore. This was personal. The stakes had changed, and the hacker knew it. Her mind raced as she tried to process everything. How had the hacker gotten so close? How had he known it was her? There was no time to lose. She immediately called Jack. The phone rang several times before he picked up. "Christina." Jack's voice was calm, but with an edge of concern. "What's happening?" "He's back," Christina said, trying to keep her voice steady. "The hacker. He sent me a message. I'm coming for you." There was a brief pause on the other end, and then Jack responded, his tone sharpening. "Do you think he's trying to make this personal? What does he want?" "I don't know," Christina said, her mind racing. "But I think he's been tracking me. This whole time, it's been about getting to me." Jack's voice grew more urgent. "We need to move fast. I'm going to have my team lock down all communication channels. Stay put, and don't engage with anyone you don't trust. We'll catch him before he does anything." Christina nodded, even though Jack couldn't see her. She knew what he was saying, but her gut told her that it wasn't going to be that easy. The hacker had been in their system for too long, had watched her too closely. He wasn't just a faceless threat anymore. He was a shadow, lurking in every corner of her life. She hung up, feeling the weight of Jack's words, but also the fear that had been gnawing at her since she first saw the hacker's message. She had to be smart. She had to keep calm. She turned back to her workstation and immediately started reviewing the logs again, hoping for a lead. But the screen remained cold, silent. The hacker had already wiped his tracks. The reality of the situation hit her like a ton of bricks. This was no longer about protecting data or stopping a breach. This was about surviving. Christina leaned back in her chair, trying to steady her breathing. She had never been afraid of hard work, of challenges, but this was something different. She had worked in restaurants before, dealing with difficult customers and unpredictable situations, but she had never faced an enemy like this. An enemy who knew exactly how to get under her skin. "I'm coming for you." The words echoed in her mind. Christina snapped back to attention. She couldn't let fear take over. She had to focus on the task at hand. She checked the secure communication channels one more time, but they were still locked down. The hacker couldn't reach her through any of the systems she was monitoring. But that didn't mean he couldn't find another way in. She needed to be proactive, not reactive. Just then, her phone buzzed again, and she froze. A new message. She looked at it cautiously. This time, the message wasn't from the hacker. It was from Jack. "I've arranged extra security for you. Stay inside until we can ensure the building is secure." Christina felt a brief moment of relief. She wasn't alone in this. Jack had her back. She wasn't sure what she would do without him, without his guidance and support. She immediately sent a quick reply, thanking him, and then began to go over the backup protocols that had been set up after the first breach. Her team had done a good job fortifying the system, but there was always a chance the hacker could exploit a weakness she hadn't seen. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. She stood quickly, walking over to the door and peering through the small window. A man in a black suit stood outside, holding a briefcase. He looked like a security professional, someone sent by Jack. Christina opened the door cautiously. "Yes?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "Christina Matthews?" the man asked, his tone polite but firm. "I'm here to make sure you're safe. Jack sent me." Christina stepped aside to let him in, feeling a small sense of comfort at the sight of another layer of protection. The man looked around her office, checking the perimeter before turning back to her. We're setting up a security perimeter around the building. You're not going anywhere until we can ensure you're safe." Christina nodded, grateful for his presence. She didn't know what Jack's plan was, but at least she wasn't entirely alone in this. As the man moved to set up some security measures in the room, Christina's phone buzzed once again. Another message. This time it was different. The hacker was back. The message read, "You can't hide from me. I know everything about you." Christina's heart skipped a beat as she read the words. There was no denying it now. The hacker wasn't just after the company's data. He was after her, and he knew far more about her than she had realized. A cold sweat began to form on her forehead as she looked up at the security professional in the room. "We have to move," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "The hacker knows I'm here." The man's expression hardened. "Don't worry, we'll handle it. Just stay here. We're getting everything locked down." Christina sat back down at her desk, but her mind was racing. The hacker was closing in on her, and she had no idea what he would do next. But she couldn't let fear control her. She had already proven she could stop him once, and she would stop him again. She just had to be smart, stay focused, and trust that she wasn't alone in this fight. Christina could feel the weight of the hacker's words bearing down on her as she sat at her desk. The message on her phone read, "You can't hide from me. I know everything about you." The chill of realization swept over her. This wasn't just a random attack anymore. The hacker had gone personal, and it was clear now. He was targeting her. She had expected the threat to be about the company, about the data, but now it was more than that. This was a fight for her own safety, and she had no choice but to face it head-on. The man from Jack's security team, who had been quietly setting up protocols in the office, looked over at her. "Everything okay?" he asked, his eyes scanning her face, noticing the shift in her demeanor. Christina didn't have to say anything. He could see it in her eyes, the fear, the tension, the realization. She swallowed hard before answering, trying to sound calm. "I think the hacker's been watching me. He's sending me messages. He knows who I am." The security man's expression hardened. "We need to move quickly. I'll contact our team and ensure the building is fully locked down. You're staying in this room until further notice." She nodded, feeling a little safer with the presence of someone who knew what they were doing. Still, the sense of vulnerability lingered. She wasn't used to being the one in need of protection. She had spent her entire life proving she could handle things on her own. Now, she felt trapped in a game she didn't know the rules to. As the security man began making calls, Christina opened the security dashboard on her computer again, trying to monitor any unusual activity. Her mind raced through possibilities. The hacker could be anywhere, and he had already shown he was capable of manipulating the system. He could be monitoring her actions right now. She had to stay one step ahead, or everything she had worked for would be at risk. The hacker's personal threat wasn't the only thing that made her uneasy. There was still the bigger picture to consider, the vulnerability of the company's entire infrastructure. The hacker knew how to exploit their weaknesses. How many other systems had been compromised? How many other employees had unwittingly helped him gain access to their data? Christina's mind spiraled as she tried to connect the dots, but then she focused on something Jack had told her during their last conversation. "We don't back down. We fight." She felt the sting of his words again, but this time, they felt like a call to action. She wasn't going to let this hacker destroy everything she had worked for. She had to fight back. As the security man finished his call and turned back to her, he nodded. "We've got extra security stationed on every floor. No one is getting in or out without clearance. You're safe here." Christina felt a small sense of relief, but the nagging voice in her head reminded her the hacker could still find a way in. They weren't safe yet. She needed to act fast and stop him before it was too late. "I need access to all the logs," she said, her voice steady with resolve. "I need to see everything. Every system the hacker accessed. We can't afford any blind spots." The security man hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. "I'll have them pulled for you. I'll also get you a direct line to our internal network to monitor in real time." Christina wasn't waiting for permission anymore. This was her fight, and she was taking control. As the hours passed, she combed through the data, pulling up records of every entry point the hacker had touched. She knew this was only a fraction of what he had done, but it was enough. The deeper she went, the clearer it became that the hacker had been working with precision, trying to gain access to the highest levels of the company's network. He was targeting the company's financial assets, and if he succeeded, it would be devastating. Christina's heart raced as she uncovered more and more of his tracks. He had been carefully erasing his presence in the system, hiding his steps like a ghost. But Christina was no rookie. She knew how to track him down, and she wasn't going to stop until she had every piece of evidence. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she found the final piece of the puzzle. The hacker had created a backdoor, a hidden access point that he had embedded in the system weeks ago. It was cleverly disguised, buried deep within the network. If she hadn't been so thorough, if she hadn't been watching for the smallest anomaly, they might never have found it. She immediately began closing off all access points, cutting off the hacker's ability to reconnect. Her hands shook as she typed, her mind focused solely on the task. This was it. If she could lock him out, the company would be safe. But just as she was about to initiate the final security shutdown, her phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen. Another message from the hacker. "You're too late." Christina froze, her blood running cold. It was then that she realized the hacker was already in the system. He had been one step ahead of her the entire time. He wasn't just trying to breach their security anymore. He had already done it. And now, he was toying with her. Christina's heart hammered in her chest as she read the hacker's message. "You're too late." Her breath caught in her throat. The realization hit her hard. He was already inside, and she had no idea how much damage had been done. The backdoor she had uncovered wasn't just a vulnerability anymore. It was a gateway the hacker had been using to gather everything he needed. He wasn't just stealing data. He was manipulating it, altering it in ways that could destroy everything Jack had built. Christina's mind raced as she scrambled to figure out the hacker's next move. She couldn't wait any longer. She had to act now. The security system was hers to control, but she needed to regain full access before the hacker could do anything irreversible. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, attempting to lock him out once and for all, but the system wasn't cooperating. His presence was still there, lurking beneath the surface. "Come on," she muttered to herself, frantically typing in commands, her pulse racing. She felt the weight of the situation bearing down on her. Jack was counting on her, and she couldn't afford to fail. She had to stop the hacker, no matter what it took. Just then, her phone buzzed again. Another message. "You think you can stop me? You've only just begun to see what I can do." Christina's stomach churned. He wasn't just after the data anymore. He was playing a game, and she was the one he wanted to break. She had underestimated him before, but now, she realized just how dangerous he truly was. The hacker wasn't just some faceless adversary in the shadows. He was clever, calculating, and always one step ahead. She gritted her teeth, refusing to let him intimidate her. She had faced tough situations before, and this was no different. This was her fight, and she wasn't going to back down. With a sense of determination, she launched a final command to lock out the hacker. But just as she pressed the enter key, the system froze. Her eyes widened as a new message appeared on the screen. "You really think you can control this?" it read. "I've been in your system for weeks. You'll never stop me." Christina's heart sank. The hacker had anticipated her every move. He was using her own security system against her. Panic clawed at her, but she pushed it aside. There had to be a way. There had to be something she could do. As she looked at the system logs, a faint glimmer of hope appeared. She saw a pattern, a small error in the hacker's manipulation. It was a mistake, something he hadn't accounted for, and Christina knew that this was her chance. Without hesitation, she rewrote the system protocols, adjusting the security measures in ways the hacker couldn't predict. The trick was to create a false loop, a decoy system that would divert his attention long enough for her to regain full control. It wasn't a guaranteed fix, but it was the only option she had left. As the minutes ticked by, Christina held her breath, watching the screen intently. She couldn't afford to make another mistake. She couldn't let the hacker win. Then, a breakthrough. The system started responding. Slowly at first, but then faster, more securely. Christina exhaled in relief as the access point closed, locking the hacker out for good. But just as she thought she had won, another chilling message appeared on her screen. "You may have stopped me, but you'll never stop what's coming." It was a threat, one that sent a shiver down Christina's spine. She had won this battle, but the war was far from over. She quickly sent an alert to Jack, detailing what had just happened and the message the hacker had left behind. She knew it was time to come clean. This wasn't just a security issue anymore. This was a personal vendetta, and it wasn't over yet. Jack responded almost immediately. Stay sharp, Christina. We're going to need everything we've got. I'll handle the external threats, but I need you to stay in the system. You're the best chance we have of keeping this from escalating. Christina nodded to herself. She had come too far to turn back now. She wasn't going to let this hacker destroy everything. She wasn't going to let him win. With the next few hours spent reviewing every security breach, Christina felt a growing sense of resolve. She had the skills, the determination, and the will to stop the hacker. She wasn't just protecting Jack's company anymore. She was protecting everything she had built, everything she had worked for. And with every challenge the hacker threw her way, Christina knew she was getting closer to winning the ultimate battle. Jack was right. This fight wasn't over, but it was far from over. And Christina was ready to see it through to the end.